Long before written chronicles attempted to explain our origins, humanity carried a deeper misconception, one woven directly into the way we interpret the past. For roughly 6,000 years, cultures across the ancient world preserved narratives that seemed to guard a hidden truth. A truth so immense, it would challenge not only the stories we inherited, but the foundations of how we understand existence. These ideas echo through the earliest surviving manuscripts and appear again in the unexplained gravitational patterns detected near the outer limits of our solar system. They form the basis of a legend centered on an elusive object in the sky. A theoretical, distant world the ancient Sumerians described as Nibiru. According to interpretations that blend mythology with speculative hypotheses, this wandering planet was believed to host powerful beings called the Anunnaki, figures said in ancient texts to possess extraordinary knowledge. Later theories suggested, without direct scientific evidence, that these beings may have influenced early human development, with some proposing they engineered Homo sapiens for labor. Modern scholars classify these interpretations as conjecture rather than established fact. Yet the mythology persists. Nibiru is often described in fringe models as following an immense orbit spanning approximately 3,600 years, imagined as a cosmic cycle associated with upheaval and societal collapse during its alleged previous approach. Contemporary astronomy does not confirm the existence of such a world, though the ongoing search for a possible ninth planet has fueled renewed curiosity. This journey moves from the clay tablets of Mesopotamia to confidential scientific investigations, tracing how ancient symbolism, misunderstood artifacts, and modern speculation converged into a story that questions whether our makers were ever real, and if so, what their return would signify for the species that rose in their shadow. The narrative begins not in ancient temples or forgotten deserts, but in the 20th century, with a researcher who believed he had uncovered a secret overlooked for nearly 6,000 years. His name was Zecharia Sitchin, a writer whose ideas would challenge conventional history by proposing that the human story was shaped by forces beyond Earth. He suggested that humanity had never been isolated, that our origins were tied to beings from another world, and that these entities might eventually return. At the core of his theory rested one extraordinary claim. Hidden within our solar system was an additional celestial body, a distant and wandering world he referred to as the 12th planet, Nibiru, supposedly inhabited by a race of advanced beings who engineered humankind for labor. Sitchin was not formally trained in archaeology or linguistics. Born in the Soviet Union and raised between Palestine and London, he worked primarily in economics and journalism. His lack of traditional academic affiliation, he argued, allowed him to interpret ancient sources without the constraints of institutional assumptions. He devoted his life to re-examining the earliest Sumerian cuneiform writings, produced by one of the oldest known civilizations, and concluded that these texts documented an actual encounter between Earth and extraterrestrial visitors, rather than mythological symbolism. His influential 1976 book, The 12th Planet, presented this idea in full. Based on his interpretations, the Sumerians understood the solar system to include 12 distinct members: the Sun, the Moon, the planets recognized today, and one additional world, Nibiru. According to his model, this hidden planet followed an immense elliptical path that required roughly 3,000 Earth years to complete a single circuit around the Sun. Most of the time, he claimed, it traveled far beyond Pluto in the deep outer regions of the system. But approximately every 3,600 years, it passed back through the inner solar system. Sitchin asserted that Nibiru was home to the Anunnaki, a term he translated as those who from heaven to earth came, depicting them not as deities, but as corporeal travelers equipped with advanced technology. He proposed that around 450,000 years ago, the inhabitants of this distant world faced ecological decline. Their atmosphere, he suggested, required microscopic particles of gold to stabilize it, prompting a desperate search for new sources of the metal. In his account, Nibiru lacked adequate reserves, compelling the Anunnaki to launch an expedition to Earth, a planet rich in the material they needed. Upon arrival, he believed they established outposts in what is now Mesopotamia and began extracting gold. Over time, however, the labor supposedly became unbearable for the lower ranks of these beings, sparking unrest. According to Sitchin, their leaders sought an alternative, creating a labor force that would endure the difficult work. Guided by an Anunnaki figure he identified as Enki, they allegedly combined their genetic material with that of an early hominid, what modern science identifies as Homo erectus, producing a hybrid species that would eventually become Homo sapiens. In Sitchin's view, humanity was engineered for servitude, designed specifically for mining and physical labor. He further interpreted the biblical story of Adam and Eve not as metaphor, but as an altered memory of genetic modification carried out in a controlled environment. His conclusions relied entirely on his personal method of reading ancient texts, where mainstream scholars recognized ceremonial language, symbolic cosmology, and mythic storytelling. He believed he saw technical descriptions and historical documentation. He often cited Sumerian cylinder seals that appear to show a central sun surrounded by several celestial bodies, including one extra object, and questioned how a civilization that existed millennia before the invention of telescopes could depict planets invisible to the naked eye, such as Uranus and Neptune, which were discovered only in the 18th and 19th centuries. For Sitchin, the explanation was straightforward. The Anunnaki themselves provided this astronomical knowledge. However, experts in Sumerian studies responded forcefully. Linguists and archaeologists argued that his translations were deeply flawed, noting that he frequently altered word meanings, merged unrelated myths, and projected modern technological concepts onto texts meant to express religious or symbolic ideas. They emphasized that the term Anunnaki referred to a group of deities within the Sumerian spiritual hierarchy, not interstellar visitors, and clarified that no ancient document explicitly describes extraterrestrial beings creating humans for mining. According to academic consensus, the scenario Sitchin described was a speculative reconstruction assembled from selective readings rather than a literal historical record. Despite the intense criticism directed at Zecharia Sitchin from academic fields, his ideas continued to spread with remarkable force. His work sold in enormous numbers and inspired a worldwide community convinced he had uncovered a hidden chapter of human history. Part of the appeal came from the way he addressed the timeless questions that have haunted every culture: the mystery of human origins, the purpose of our existence, and the possibility that humanity is not a solitary species in the cosmos. His narrative blended myth with what he framed as scientific interpretation, transforming distant deities into physical beings with motives rooted in technology and survival rather than divinity. Another factor driving his popularity was a growing suspicion toward institutional authority. He portrayed the academic world as unwilling to consider alternative explanations, or even actively involved in suppressing them. This theme of resistance and secrecy became woven into the larger mythology surrounding Nibiru, expanding the story into the realm of conspiracy. From here, more speculative theories took root, not only about Nibiru, but about Sitchin himself. Some writers proposed that he had connections to Freemasonry or other esoteric groups, citing his interest in ancient symbols, hidden lineages, and recurring imagery such as the winged disc found in both Mesopotamian art and later occult traditions. According to these conjectures, he was not merely an independent thinker, but perhaps a chosen figure, tasked with revealing fragments of a concealed tradition. This line of speculation suggested that knowledge of Nibiru and the Anunnaki had been guarded by secret societies for centuries, and that Sitchin served as a controlled medium for releasing it. If such claims were accurate, they implied that his published work represented only a partial disclosure. The unsettling implication was that further information remained purposely withheld. Zecharia Sitchin passed away in 2010, leaving a legacy filled with controversy and a long list of unresolved debates. Yet he succeeded in reigniting curiosity about the earliest records of human civilization, pushing many to reconsider whether ancient myths contained memories of real events. To assess whether Sitchin uncovered profound truth or constructed an imaginative reinterpretation, one must return to the original recordings themselves. The answer lies in the clay tablets, in the cuneiform signs impressed by scribes thousands of years ago, and in the genuine meanings assigned to the word Nibiru by the people who first used it. Finding clarity requires setting aside the layers of recent interpretation and turning directly to the Mesopotamian sources. Sitchin's entire system depends on how these ancient texts were translated. Thus, the essential question becomes, what do the tablets genuinely communicate? When consulting specialists in Assyriology, scholars who have spent their careers studying Akkadian and Sumerian languages, a far different understanding emerges. The term Nibiru appears in several authentic documents, but its definition within ancient contexts is significantly more nuanced than the planetary body Sitchin described. An important correction arises immediately. Sitchin regularly identified Nibiru as a Sumerian concept, yet the word itself is not Sumerian at all. It originates in Akkadian, the Semitic language spoken by later Babylonian and Assyrian cultures. Its linguistic root, Nibiru, conveys the idea of crossing or passage. The core meaning is therefore a crossing point or a place of transition, not a proper name for a distant world. This linguistic detail undermines the interpretation of Nibiru as a 12th planet, indicating instead that it referred to a position or phenomenon in the sky. One of the most well-known references to Nibiru appears in the Babylonian creation epic Enuma Elish, which recounts the rise of the deity Marduk. After overcoming the primordial forces of chaos, Marduk organizes the cosmos and establishes fixed positions for the celestial bodies. In this narrative, he designates Nibiru as a stabilizing marker. The text states that he positioned Nibiru so it could regulate the courses of the other stars, ensuring that none strayed from their designated paths. In this mythological framework, Nibiru functions not as a wandering invader, but as an ordering point, a celestial reference that helps define cosmic structure. It serves as an overseer of the heavens, symbolizing regularity rather than disruption. This stands in stark contrast to the notion of a destructive planet returning every few thousand years. To locate what Nibiru represented in observational terms, it is necessary to shift from mythology to early astronomy. Babylonian astronomers recorded extensive data on stars and planetary movements, compiling their knowledge into detailed catalogs. One of the most important of these documents is the Mul-e-Apin series, assembled around the beginning of the first millennium BC. This text lists constellations, planetary behavior, and seasonal markers. Within it, Nibiru is identified as the celestial body associated with the transition from one year to the next, appearing near the region of the vernal equinox. It is described as a star visible in the west at the close of the year, and later in the east at the beginning of the next. These descriptions reflect an object with predictable annual behavior rather than a planet on a multi-thousand-year orbit that vanishes into the outer solar system. In ancient astronomical terms, Nibiru was a point of alignment marking seasonal change, not a hidden world approaching Earth at long intervals. According to the prevailing academic view, the most grounded interpretation of Nibiru is far simpler than the dramatic versions found in modern pseudo-historical narratives. For the overwhelming majority of scholars who study ancient Mesopotamia, Nibiru is understood as one of the many names the Babylonians applied to the planet Jupiter. This conclusion aligns seamlessly with their mythology. Jupiter was unequivocally tied to Marduk, the central deity of the Babylonian pantheon. Since the Enuma Elish identifies Nibiru as the star of Marduk, the association follows naturally. Jupiter, as the largest planet in the solar system, exerts a commanding presence both visually and symbolically, making it a fitting celestial counterpart for a supreme god. Its bright, stable appearance in the night sky would make it an ideal symbol of cosmic order, a heavenly marshal ensuring that the other celestial bodies followed their proper courses. Because Babylonian astronomers often assigned multiple names to the same planet, depending on its position or the season, it is highly likely that Jupiter was called Nibiru when it reached the celestial equator, the literal crossing point between the northern and southern skies. Yet, treating this as an entirely settled issue oversimplifies the ancient evidence. Mesopotamian astronomy contains nuances that resist a single, rigid definition. A tablet known as Astrolabe B presents an intriguing challenge. It describes the red star that stands in the south after the gods of the night have completed their duties, dividing the sky in half, and then identifies this red star as Nibiru. This detail is puzzling. Jupiter is not commonly described as red. That description is far more typical of Mars or the brilliant red supergiant Antares. This raises legitimate questions. Might Nibiru, in some contexts, have referred to Mars? Or could atmospheric conditions occasionally tint Jupiter's appearance? This single line complicates an otherwise straightforward identification. Adding to the complexity, A handful of tablets distinguish between Nibiru and the planet Jupiter, known in Sumerian tradition as Mul Babar. Some readers point to these listings as evidence that the ancients viewed them as separate celestial bodies. The most plausible explanation is that the meaning of the term Nibiru evolved over time. In earlier periods, it may have indicated a particular star or even an astronomical concept, a point where paths or seasons converged. As Babylon rose in political and religious influence, and as Marduk became the dominant deity, his associated planet Jupiter may have increasingly inherited the title of Nibiru as an emblem of divine authority. This would clarify why later texts explicitly unite Jupiter and Nibiru, while earlier ones present a more ambiguous picture. These inconsistencies do not support the notion of a secret, undiscovered world on a vast elliptical orbit. Instead, they reflect an evolving astronomical and religious framework spanning centuries, something Sitchin's literal, static interpretation does not accommodate. When the earliest sources are examined without modern overlays, what emerges is not the outline of alien engineers or a hidden celestial intruder, but a sophisticated symbolic language used to map meaning onto the night sky. Nibiru was a crossing point, a marker of cosmic alignment, a symbol of celestial governance, and in many cases, a title associated with Jupiter in its role as the manifestation of Marduk's power. The truly astonishing insight here is not the existence of a concealed planet, but the advanced observational astronomy practiced by Babylonian scholars. Their worldview blended mythic narrative with the careful tracking of planetary motion, creating a system that sought to decipher order within the cosmos long before the invention of telescopes. In this context, Nibiru becomes a testament to the intellectual ingenuity of an ancient civilization, rather than a clue to extraterrestrial intervention. Yet, to understand why the Babylonians saw the need for a celestial guardian like Marduk and his star Nibiru, it is necessary to explore the mythology that preceded their organized cosmos, a story rooted in primordial conflict. Before the heavens were arranged and the planets followed predictable patterns, the universe, in their telling, was a place of disorder and violence. This is the drama at the center of the Enuma Elish. For mainstream scholars, it serves as a symbolic narrative reflecting the rise of Babylon and the political ascendance of Marduk over older Sumerian gods. But for Zecharia Sitchin, this tale was not an invented allegory. He believed it preserved a distorted memory of an actual astronomical event, a cosmic collision that shaped the early solar system and ultimately gave rise to Earth. To fully understand the Nibiru hypothesis, it becomes necessary to enter this ancient story and examine the extraordinary reinterpretation Sitchin built upon it. The Babylonian creation epic opens not with a structured universe, but with an undivided expanse of primordial waters, embodied by two ancient forces: Apsu, the representation of fresh groundwater, and Tiamat, the immense and turbulent embodiment of the salt seas. From their mingling come the earliest gods, energetic and unruly beings whose growing vitality unsettles the older Apsu. Disturbed by their clamor, he resolves to wipe them out. Yet his scheme is uncovered, and the clever deity Ea, identified by Sitchin with the figure of Enki, strikes first, killing Apsu while he sleeps. Tiamat, once portrayed as a creative, stabilizing presence, is transformed into an enraged engine of vengeance. She summons a terrifying host of monstrous beings, venomous serpents, scorpion warriors, and powerful demons, and elevates her new consort, Kingu, as commander of her forces. Overwhelmed by dread, the younger gods cannot face her. Their deliverance arrives in the form of Marduk, Ea's son, a young god of immense prowess and ambition. He offers to confront Tiamat, but only on the condition that he be granted unquestioned authority should he emerge victorious. With no alternative, the gods accept. Instead of common weapons, Marduk prepares himself with the powers of nature. He gathers the four winds, commands storms, shapes a vast net to entangle the dragon, and rides into battle atop a roaring tempest. The confrontation is immense in scale. As Tiamat opens her jaws to consume him, Marduk releases the evil wind, forcing her body open and leaving her unable to resist. He then sends an arrow straight into her heart, ending her threat. After defeating her, he subdues her monstrous army and seizes from Kingu the Tablet of Destinies, solidifying his supremacy. Returning to Tiamat's massive body, he performs an act of cosmic architecture. He splits her form in two, raising one half to craft the heavens and laying the other down to shape the earth. He arranges the constellations, sets in motion the celestial cycles, and organizes the structure of the universe. In this myth, he does far more than win a divine conflict. He imposes cosmic order upon primordial chaos. Through Sitchin's interpretive lens, however, this myth was not metaphor, but an encoded scientific account. He argued that these divine characters were not gods, but celestial bodies, and the epic described the earliest history of the solar system. In his reconstruction, Tiamat was not a dragon, but a large protoplanet once located between Mars and Jupiter. Apsu represented the sun. The younger gods were the other planets, and Marduk symbolized an entirely different world, Nibiru. According to Sitchin, Nibiru was a massive, distant planet that entered the young solar system on a retrograde path, captured by the sun's gravitational pull. As it moved past the outer planets, its orbit shifted inward, placing it on a direct trajectory toward Tiamat. The mythic battle, in his view, described an actual cosmic collision that shaped the modern solar system. Sitchin developed this interpretation with intricate detail. In his model, Nibiru first passed near Tiamat without hitting it directly. Instead, one of Nibiru's 7 satellites, symbolized by the winds wielded by Marduk, struck Tiamat and inflicted catastrophic damage. This matched the mythic moment when Marduk uses the winds to disable the dragon. On its next orbit, which Sitchin asserted occurred after roughly 3,600 years, Nibiru itself collided with the already weakened Tiamat, tearing it apart. In this reading, Marduk slicing the dragon's body corresponds to the physical fragmentation of Tiamat. Sitchin proposed that one large portion of the shattered planet, along with its principal satellite, Kingu, was thrust inward toward the sun and eventually stabilized between Venus and Mars. Water from the primordial planet supposedly filled the enormous rupture caused by the collision, forming what he argued became the world we inhabit, Earth. Kingu, damaged and captured by Earth's gravity, became our moon. The massive basin left behind, he claimed, survives today as the Pacific Ocean. The remaining fragments of Tiamat, pulverized beyond cohesion, scattered along its former orbit and coalesced into the asteroid belt, the hammered bracelet mentioned in the myth. Even the long-period comets, according to Sitchin, were remnants flung to the edges of the solar system by the force of the collision. This reinterpretation was undeniably imaginative. It offered a unified explanation for multiple scientific puzzles: the formation of the asteroid belt, the unusual distribution of Earth's continents, the origin of the large Earth-Moon system, and the behavior of long-period comets. It transformed an ancient story into a dramatic hypothesis about planetary formation. Yet modern science finds significant issues with this reconstruction. While the formation of Earth's moon is widely attributed to a colossal impact, the accepted model, the giant impact hypothesis, suggests that a Mars-sized body, often called Theia, collided with the early Earth, not with an older planet between Mars and Jupiter. Geological and orbital evidence does not support the existence of a destroyed protoplanet in that region, whose remains match Sitchin's description. In the view of modern planetary science, the scenario proposed by Sitchin is considered physically untenable. The amount of energy required to bisect a planet-sized body and send one half into a stable, nearly circular orbit close to the Sun would almost certainly have annihilated both objects entirely, leaving behind nothing but diffuse debris. Instead of forming Earth, the collision would have created an even more massive and chaotic asteroid field. Geological evidence also contradicts the notion that the current asteroid belt originated from a water-rich planet, like the theoretical Tiamat. Studies of asteroid composition show that the belt consists of primordial material that never aggregated into a single world, its formation inhibited by Jupiter's overwhelming gravitational influence rather than interrupted by a destroyed planet. Yet despite these scientific objections, conspiracy theories surrounding this part of Sitchin's narrative persist. According to some, institutions such as NASA and the broader astronomical community already know aspects of this ancient cosmic history, but deliberately conceal it. The reasoning, these theorists argue, is simple. Acknowledging a long-period rogue planet capable of reshaping the solar system would generate unprecedented global fear. If evidence existed for a catastrophic collision in the past, people would assume another was inevitable in the future. Recognizing an object on a multi-millennial orbit that intersects Earth's path would destabilize civilization itself. Therefore, they claim, the scientific establishment promotes the idea that the asteroid belt is leftover building material and dismisses Sitchin's interpretations as pseudoscience to maintain social stability. In this telling, the Enuma Elish is preserved as myth, while its alleged scientific truth is intentionally obscured. Sitchin's followers argue that if he were correct about this ancient planetary catastrophe, then Earth's very existence would be the result of unimaginable violence, and the cosmic force that reshaped the solar system would still be moving along its enormous orbit, counting down toward another return in a cycle lasting 3,600 years. If humanity was engineered by technologically advanced extraterrestrial beings, then those beings must have operated according to a larger plan. And if their home world periodically re-enters the inner solar system, then the timeline of those returns would matter. To Sitchin, this was not speculation, but chronology. He claimed to offer a detailed 450,000-year record of humanity's interaction with the Anunnaki and a specific schedule for their reappearance. Central to this timeline was one critical number, 3,600. This value, he insisted, was the key to decoding both our origins and our future. It represented, in his model, the length in Earth years of a single orbit of Nibiru. Sitchin traced this number to the Sumerian sexagesimal number system, which used a unit called the shar, or Shah, equivalent to 3,600. While mainstream scholars explain the shar as simply a large numerical unit, much like 1,000 or 1,000,000 in modern counting, Sitchin interpreted it as a cosmic measurement, a literal Nibiruan year. To him, it served as a Rosetta Stone for reconstructing history. Applying this cycle to ancient records, he believed he could piece together the chronology of extraterrestrial governance on Earth. He focused especially on the Sumerian king list, a document cataloging the rulers of early Mesopotamian cities and the lengths of their reigns. The list famously attributes enormous lifespans to antediluvian kings, reigns lasting 28,800 years, 36,000 years, even 43,200 years. Historians view these figures as literary flourishes meant to express divine favor or political grandeur. Sitchin interpreted them differently. By dividing these reigns by 3,600, he obtained much smaller, seemingly plausible numbers. A ruler said to have reigned 36,000 years, for example, would have ruled for 10 shars, 10 Nibiruan years. He argued that the list did not document human kings using Earth time, but rather chronicled the terms of Anunnaki officials measured in their own planetary years. The Great Flood described in the text, he claimed, marked the transition from extraterrestrial governors to hybrid rulers, whose lifespans were dramatically shorter, resulting in shorter reigns. Using this 3,600-year cycle, Sitchin assembled a historical framework. Roughly 450,000 years ago, 125 shars before the present, the Anunnaki, led by their sovereign Anu, journeyed to Earth in search of gold to repair Nibiru's atmosphere. Their initial leader on Earth was Enki, whom Sitchin depicted as a brilliant scientist overseeing the establishment of their first outpost, Eridu, in southern Mesopotamia. According to Sitchin's interpretation, later waves of Anunnaki travelers continued to arrive on Earth, establishing early settlements while their laboring class, the Igigi, carried out exhausting work in the gold-rich regions of Africa. Over time, resentment grew. Around 300,000 years ago, these workers allegedly revolted, refusing to continue the relentless mining operations. This rebellion became, in Sitchin's narrative, the catalyst for the creation of humankind. He argued that Enki responded to the crisis not with discipline, but with innovation. Using advanced genetic techniques, he supposedly fused Anunnaki DNA with that of an indigenous hominid, Homo erectus, through laboratory procedures resembling in vitro fertilization. The resulting being, called the Lulu, the mixed one, became the first Homo sapiens, engineered as a basic labor force designed to serve their extraterrestrial overseers. In this framework, the biblical account of Adam and Eve was interpreted not as spiritual allegory, but as a simplified recollection of a real genetic engineering event. For ages, humanity was said to have served its creators. Yet within the Anunnaki leadership, conflicting views emerged. Enki, having played a direct role in humanity's genesis, supposedly developed a protective, almost paternal bond with the species. His half-brother Enlil, commander of the mission, regarded humans as noisy, flawed, and troublesome creations. Sitchin viewed this rivalry as the origin of the battles among the gods that fill ancient mythologies. A turning point in this saga arrives around 13,000 BC. According to Sitchin, the Anunnaki, monitoring Earth both from orbital platforms and ground installations, recognized that Nibiru's next sweep through the inner solar system would unleash catastrophic changes. He claimed they predicted that the movement of this planet would destabilize the Antarctic ice sheet, forcing it into the sea and triggering a devastating global flood. Many ancient cultures preserve stories of a deluge, and Sitchin framed these as memories of the same event. Enlil, in this interpretation, viewed the coming disaster as an opportunity to eliminate a failed experiment. He demanded secrecy and forbade intervention. Enki, however, quietly rebelled. He approached a loyal human named Ziusudra in Sumerian writings and Noah in the biblical tradition, and instructed him to build a sealed vessel capable of surviving massive inundation. When the flood arrived, nearly all humans were wiped out. But because of Enki's forbidden warning, a small remnant survived. After the waters receded, Enlil, confronted with humanity's continued existence, was forced to tolerate their survival. According to Sitchin, the Anunnaki then shifted from using humans solely as laborers to cultivating them as a developing civilization. They introduced agriculture, animal domestication, and organized culture, laying the groundwork for Sumer around 3800 BC. In his timeline, each subsequent passage of Nibiru, every 3,600 years, coincided with dramatic turning points in human development. The rise of Sumer, the construction of monumental structures, and the formation of powerful empires were framed as events guided by Anunnaki influence aligned with their planet's orbital rhythm. The most recent return, according to Sitchin's chronology, occurred near 1600 BC and was marked not by peaceful oversight, but by conflict. He argued that internal warfare broke out among the Anunnaki, culminating in a destructive event that he linked to the annihilation of Sodom and Gomorrah, interpreted as ancient spaceport sites, and to the abrupt collapse of Sumerian civilization. After this episode, the Anunnaki supposedly reduced their overt involvement, choosing instead to act indirectly through select bloodlines and covert groups. This leads to the inevitable question: when would Nibiru appear again? Because Sitchin's own writings are fragmented and occasionally inconsistent, estimates vary widely. Some attempting to extrapolate his calculations suggested a window between 2060 and 2090, while others, aligning his material with unrelated prophetic traditions, proposed dates such as 2012. The failure of such predictions has been used as a major argument against the theory. Here the conspiratorial interpretations deepen. One idea suggests that if the 3,600-year cycle is genuine, Sitchin may have been given the wrong initial reference point, ensuring every forecast would be inaccurate, and thus discredit the subject entirely. A more unsettling notion proposes that the Anunnaki themselves may hold conflicting goals. The lineage associated with Enki might be protective toward humanity, while the faction connected to Enlil might view humankind as a flawed project that should be erased. In Sitchin's framework, the next arrival of Nibiru would not simply mark the return of a distant world. It would represent the culmination of a conflict he believed had simmered for 450,000 years, with Earth positioned at its center and humanity caught between opposing extraterrestrial factions. Whether this return would bring protection or punishment, advancement or annihilation, remained the ultimate question. And according to his timeline, the answer was due within our own era. Long before Sitchin described a hidden planetary home of the Anunnaki, astronomers had already been troubled by a different mystery, an invisible influence tugging on the outer solar system. It was not a literal ghost, but a gravitational one, an unseen presence subtly disturbing the motion of known planets. For more than 170 years, researchers have searched for a large, undiscovered body beyond Neptune, a massive object whose gravity shapes the behavior of the distant solar system. They called it Planet X, with the X symbolizing the unknown. The pursuit of this world became one of the most remarkable scientific investigations in astronomy. A story powered not by legend, but by observable anomalies, the kind that demand explanation. The trail began with Uranus. After its discovery in 1781, astronomers charted its orbit with extraordinary precision, yet the planet refused to follow predictions. At times, it moved faster than expected. At other times, slower. Something appeared to be pulling on it. Urbain Le Verrier, a French mathematician with a relentless mind, devoted himself to the puzzle. He proposed that the irregularities were caused by the gravitational pull of a yet unknown world orbiting even farther from the Sun. In 1846, using mathematical calculations alone, he predicted its location. When astronomers at the Berlin Observatory pointed their telescope to the coordinates he provided, they found Neptune on the very first night. It was a triumph of intellect. A planet discovered not through observation first, but through mathematics. For a moment, the mystery seemed solved. But even when Neptune was added to the equations, small deviations persisted in the orbits of both Uranus and Neptune. These discrepancies were minor, but they refused to disappear. The unseen force was still out there. This lingering mystery drove the wealthy astronomer Percival Lowell to establish an observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona, dedicated largely to the hunt for Planet X. Despite years of searching, he never found the elusive object. He died in 1916, leaving behind calculations and a legacy of unanswered questions. In 1930, Clyde Tombaugh, a young researcher working from Lowell's observatory, discovered a moving point of light that would later be named Pluto. For a brief period, astronomers thought the hunt was over, but relief quickly turned to disappointment. Pluto was far too small to influence Uranus or Neptune in any meaningful way. Even early measurements overestimated its size. Today we know it is smaller than Earth's moon. The gravitational anomalies remained unexplained. The discovery of Pluto, while monumental, had been a coincidence. The real Planet X, the massive object shaping the distant solar system, was still missing. For much of the 20th century, the search lost momentum. But in 1992, everything changed. Astronomers David Jewett and Jane Liu identified the first object beyond Pluto, providing evidence for a vast region of icy bodies orbiting the Sun. This area became known as the Kuiper Belt. Its existence fundamentally altered our understanding of the solar system. Instead of ending at Pluto, the system extended into a brawling wilderness of frozen worlds, and it was in the behavior of the most distant Kuiper Belt objects, KEOS, that the gravitational ghost re-emerged with new strength. As astronomers catalogued these icy bodies, they noticed something profoundly strange. A subset of the most distant KBOS all shared unusual, highly similar orbital characteristics. Their orbits were tilted in comparable ways, and the points where they came closest to the Sun were clustered together in a single region of the sky. Such alignment should not occur naturally. In a random system, those orbits would point in every direction, like scattered arrows. Instead, they pointed the same way. Statistically, the odds of this happening by chance are less than 0.007%. The pattern was unmistakable. It was as if a group of distant objects were being guided or herded by an unseen gravitational force. This led to the modern formulation of the Planet X concept, now widely referred to as Planet 9. Scientists calculating the necessary force concluded that only a planet with substantial mass, likely around 10 times that of Earth, could produce such an effect. This world would have to follow an enormous, elongated orbit, traveling hundreds of astronomical units from the Sun before slowly looping back. In this modern version of the Planet X mystery, the hypothetical world would be hiding in the most remote frontier of the Kuiper Belt, its immense gravity quietly reshaping the orbits of anything that drifts too close. Another puzzle adds weight to this speculation: the Kuiper Cliff. The Kuiper Belt extends outward from the Sun in a dense ring of icy bodies until around 50 astronomical units, 50 times the distance between Earth and the Sun. Then, abruptly, the population of objects plummets. A sudden boundary appears where theory suggests none should exist. One leading explanation is that a massive, unseen planet swept that region clean, ejecting objects into deep space or trapping them as satellites, acting like a colossal gravitational snowplow, carving a sharp edge into the solar system. While mainstream astronomers consider this scenario plausible but unproven, conspiracy theorists take the idea much further. Among the most discussed claims is that this mysterious planet, whether called Planet X or Nibiru, was already detected decades ago. Supporters of this view point to the 1983 ERASED, the Infrared Astronomical Satellite Survey. On December 30th of that year, the Washington Post published an article titled "Possibly as Large as Jupiter, Mystery Heavenly Body Discovered," which described the detection of a strange object in the direction of Orion. The chief scientist associated with the mission was quoted as saying that its nature was unknown. Within 24 hours, the story was revised, and officials declared the detection to be a distant galaxy or a cloud of interstellar gas. To conspiracy researchers, the retraction was not a clarification, but evidence of a deliberate suppression. In their view, IRAS had identified Nibiru, and the discovery was immediately classified to avoid worldwide panic. According to this narrative, the modern search for Planet 9 is merely a sanitized public version of a hunt that was secretly resolved nearly 40 years ago. A slow and controlled release of information preparing humanity for a truth that has long been known. Regardless of whether the explanation comes from conventional astrophysics or from fringe interpretations, the underlying conclusion remains the same. The solar system as we know it may be incomplete. Something in the darkness appears to be sculpting the outer regions in ways we cannot yet see. What was once dismissed as a myth now resembles a genuine scientific question. In the past decade, the rumored ghost has evolved into a quantified hypothesis. A world with a predicted mass, a proposed orbital inclination, and a mathematically inferred path. In 2016, planetary scientists Konstantin Batygin and Mike Brown at Caltech published a groundbreaking study that presented the strongest statistical case yet for a giant planet lurking far beyond Neptune. Their discovery did not come from a telescope, but from the patterns hidden within the motions of distant icy bodies, an unmistakable gravitational signature woven into the data of half a dozen remote Kuiper Belt objects. Batygin and Brown had not begun as believers. Their original goal was to dismiss the growing claims of a hidden planet by demonstrating that the apparent orbital clustering of distant objects was simply observational bias. But every simulation they ran produced the same stubborn result. The orbits were not random. The strange trajectories of these far-flung bodies, including the isolated dwarf planet Sedna, behaved as though they were being guided by a single massive perturber. The attempt to disprove Planet X instead created the most compelling evidence for it. Their analysis described a world unlike any of the 8 known planets. They labeled it Planet 9. Based on their models, Planet 9 would be enormous, between 5 and 10 times the mass of Earth, placing it in the category of a super-Earth or mini-Neptune, types of planets common in other star systems, but absent from our own. Its orbit would not lie flat along the same plane as the classical planets. Instead, it would be dramatically tilted, inclined by roughly 30 degrees. Even more striking was its extreme elongation. At its closest approach to the Sun, it would still be about 200 astronomical units away, far beyond the Kuiper Belt. At its furthest point, it could travel to an astonishing 1,200 astronomical units, deep into the region known as the Oort cloud. This vast, sweeping orbit is the defining feature of the hypothesis. A complete circuit around the Sun would take an extraordinary span of time, estimated between 10,000 and 20,000 Earth years. A world on such a trajectory would spend most of its existence in total darkness, only occasionally venturing close enough to influence the rest of the solar system. The reason Planet 9 has remained invisible becomes obvious once its orbit is understood. For the overwhelming majority of its immense journey, it would be positioned at such staggering distances that it becomes nearly indistinguishable from the star field behind it, an object so faint and so slow that it blends into the cosmic background. This vast timescale forms one of the clearest points of separation between the scientific Planet 9 hypothesis and Sitchin's Nibiru narrative. Sitchin's world allegedly completes an orbit in 3,600 years, a figure incompatible with the 10,000 to 20,000 year orbit proposed for Planet 9. Critics view this mismatch as definitive evidence against Sitchin's claims. Believers, however, argue the discrepancy suggests a more complicated scenario. Perhaps the two bodies are distinct, or perhaps Nibiru's orbit has altered dramatically over long spans of time. The mathematical framework developed by Batygin and Brown is multi-layered and, to many researchers, profoundly persuasive. First comes the alignment of the 6 most distant Kuiper Belt objects. Under the influence of a massive unseen planet, these smaller bodies naturally fall into the unusual, clustered orbital configuration observed today. This gravitational shepherding provides an elegant, unified explanation for their peculiar alignment. Second, their model predicted an entirely new population of objects, Kuiper Belt bodies with orbits tilted almost perpendicular to the rest of the solar system. At the time the prediction was made, no such objects had been identified. Yet in the years that followed, astronomers did indeed discover several bodies whose orbits matched the predicted 90-degree inclination almost exactly. It was a moment reminiscent of theoretical physics, when a scientist predicts the existence of a particle long before experiments confirm it. Third is the puzzle of the sun's tilt. The sun's rotational axis is offset by roughly 6 degrees relative to the orbital plane of the planets. For decades, this discrepancy has lacked a widely accepted explanation. A distant, massive planet on a sharply inclined orbit could, over billions of years, slowly torque the entire system, nudging the planets away from the sun's equator and producing the tilt seen today. Under this interpretation, Planet 9 would not simply sculpt the Kuiper Belt. It would be subtly tipping the architecture of the whole solar system. Yet even with all this evidence, the object has not been directly seen. The difficulty lies in the sheer darkness and immensity of its orbit. At such distances, the sun's light is extremely weak, making the planet incredibly dim. Its motion across the sky is glacially slow, making it indistinguishable from the background without repeated, painstaking observations. Finding such an object is comparable to searching for a drifting grain of dark sand on an enormous black beach at midnight using only a weak lantern. Modern sky surveys like Pan-STARRS have scanned large swaths of the sky where Planet 9 might reside, but none have yet revealed it. Still, optimism remains. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory in Chile is poised to begin full operations soon, and its powerful wide-field telescope will scan the southern sky with unprecedented sensitivity. Many astronomers believe that if Planet 9 exists, the Rubin Observatory's early data will uncover it. Suspicion surrounds even this optimistic outlook. Some conspiracy theories claim that the Batygin-Brown announcement was not an independent scientific breakthrough, but a controlled release of information. According to this view, government or military agencies secretly confirmed the existence of Nibiru, or Planet X, decades ago through classified missions such as ERASED. As the hypothetical object's approach made eventual rediscovery inevitable, officials allegedly opted to reintroduce the planet to the public through academic channels, framing it as a distant scientific curiosity rather than a cyclical threat. In this telling, the 10 to 20,000 year orbit is part of an intentional misdirection designed to push any notion of a return far into the future. The alleged true orbital period, 3,600 years, is said to be concealed to prevent mass panic. Under this interpretation, the search for Planet 9 becomes less a quest for knowledge and more a scripted performance meant to acclimate humanity to an uncomfortable truth. What the scientific effort has undeniably revealed, however, is a humbling recognition. The outer solar system remains an immense and mysterious domain. While no planet has yet been sighted, the gravitational anomalies persist, and a Neptune-size world remains the most plausible explanation for their origin. A reminder that even in the 21st century, our cosmic backyard is far from fully mapped. The unfolding search for Planet 9 has revealed possibilities far stranger and potentially far more unsettling than a distant, unseen world drifting through the outer darkness. An increasing number of researchers have begun to consider whether the gravitational puzzle at the edge of the solar system may not point to a planet at all, but to something fundamentally different, something our current cosmological models have not fully anticipated. Among the most provocative alternatives is the idea that the gravitational signature attributed to Planet 9 might instead come from a dark stellar companion, a hidden partner to our Sun. In the broader galaxy, our star is an anomaly. Most stars, like the Sun, exist not alone, but in binary or multiple star systems. This raises a natural question. Could our Sun once have had, or still possess, an undetected companion star? This hypothetical body is often referred to as Nemesis. It would not resemble the bright, radiant Sun. Instead, Nemesis would likely be a brown dwarf, a failed star with a mass greater than Jupiter's, but insufficient to trigger hydrogen fusion. Such objects emit primarily in the faint infrared spectrum, making them extraordinarily difficult to detect with optical telescopes. If a brown dwarf companion orbited the Sun at an extraordinary distance, perhaps a light year or more, it would follow a stretched, elongated path. For tens of millennia, it would remain a harmless, forgotten neighbor. But as it moved inward, its gravity could sweep through the Oort cloud, the vast spherical shell of trillions of frozen bodies surrounding the solar system. Passing through that region would be like a predator disturbing a school of fish, sending a surge of comets plunging toward the inner solar system. Nemesis was originally proposed in the 1980s as a potential explanation for what appeared to be a 26 million year cycle in mass extinctions on Earth. The gravitational influence predicted for Planet 9 is far too small to explain such periodic devastation, but a brown dwarf would be powerful enough to disrupt the Oort cloud on that scale. Another possibility stretches the imagination even further. Some theorists have suggested that Planet 9 might not be a planet at all, but a primordial black hole, a PBH. This idea pushes the boundaries of conventional astrophysics. Primordial black holes differ from the stellar black holes formed by collapsing stars. Instead, they are hypothetical relics forged in the unimaginable density of the first fractions of a second after the Big Bang. Although most would have evaporated over billions of years, theoretical models allow for the survival of black holes with masses comparable to planets. A black hole with 5 to 10 times Earth's mass would be astonishingly small, no larger than a grapefruit, yet would exert the same gravitational pull as a super-Earth. Such an object would be the truest form of a cosmic phantom, completely invisible, neither emitting nor reflecting light. It would appear only through its gravitational fingerprints on the distant Kuiper Belt objects. The question, then, is how such an object might be detected. One method would be through the minute flashes that occur when the black hole passes in front of a distant star, producing a gravitational lensing effect. Another possibility is the faint burst of radiation that might occur if it consumed a wandering comet. Researchers Jakub Scholz and James Unwin have seriously proposed this scenario as a legitimate alternative to the Planet 9 hypothesis. The notion that a relic of the Big Bang, no larger than a piece of fruit yet weighing several Earths, could be orbiting our sun is startling, even by the standards of theoretical physics. Conspiracy theories emerging from these ideas are even more extreme. If a brown dwarf companion truly existed, critics argue, confirming it would immediately reveal that the solar system periodically experiences extinction-level comet storms. Such knowledge would destabilize human civilization, and in this view, would give governments overwhelming motivation to conceal its existence. The primordial black hole theory invites further speculation. Some fringe theorists have connected the idea of a small black hole orbiting our sun with the work done at CERN's Large Hadron Collider. For years, internet conspiracies have claimed that CERN is attempting to open multi-dimensional gateways. Under this view, the goal is different. Not to create a portal, but to study or harness the energy of a nearby primordial black hole. Such an object, formed in the birth scream of the universe itself, would contain information about the deepest laws of physics. It might not simply orbit the sun. It could be a reservoir of exotic energy or a key to unifying theories long thought impossible. Even anomalies within our own solar system have fueled these speculations. For decades, one of the most puzzling mysteries was the Pioneer anomaly, a measurable but unexplained slowing observed in the Pioneer 10 and Pioneer 11 spacecraft as they traveled out of the solar system. Although the Pioneer anomaly was ultimately attributed to the faint recoil produced by heat radiating from the spacecraft themselves, some researchers still argue that it hints at unrecognized gravitational behavior or even a modification of known physics at extreme distances from the Sun. A similar puzzle emerges from the flyby anomaly, in which several spacecraft have unexpectedly gained or lost tiny amounts of energy while slingshotting around Earth. These deviations are subtle, but they serve as reminders that our grasp of dynamics within the solar system is still incomplete. Whether Planet 9 turns out to be a super-Earth, a hidden stellar companion, or a primordial black hole no larger than a piece of fruit, the very possibility of such an object forces a profound rethinking of our cosmic environment. Our planetary neighborhood is not the tidy clockwork system once imagined. It is an immense, shadowed domain shaped by forces we are only now learning to detect. The invisible hand guiding the outer solar system is real. The uncertainty lies only in what shape it ultimately takes. If a celestial body periodically returned to disrupt the inner solar system, its arrival would have been the most unforgettable catastrophe humanity had ever witnessed. Such a moment would carve itself into our collective memory, surviving for millennia in myths, scriptures, and folklore. And when the mythological record is examined across cultures that had no contact with one another, a striking pattern emerges. Countless stories describe a terrifying heavenly intruder. The names differ, the imagery varies, yet the themes remain unsettlingly similar. A blazing presence appears in the sky, followed by fire, floods, darkness, or the collapse of an age. One of the most explicit versions appears in a highly debated set of writings known as the Kolbrin Bible. Said to be a collection of ancient Egyptian and Celtic manuscripts preserved after the burning of Glastonbury Abbey in 1184. Its authenticity remains a point of fierce dispute. Regardless of its origin, the text's descriptions are startling. It recounts a recurring cosmic upheaval brought on by an object referred to as the Destroyer. The Kolbrin describes it as a vast, reddish body that returns at the culmination of great cycles, its arrival marking a time of devastation. Men forget the days of the Destroyer, one passage declares. Only the wise know where it went, and that it will return in its appointed hour. The prose speaks of terror rather than symbolism. It describes the sky catching fire, the earth tilting, and violent earthquakes tearing apart mountains. It speaks of waters rushing across continents, red dust falling like blood from the heavens, and plagues sweeping over the survivors. One line reads, "The destroyer rode in a black, rolling cloud. Its mouth was an abyss of flames, and from it came smoke and burning cinders." These accounts resemble less a theological metaphor and more a vivid memory of a celestial near miss, complete with references to atmospheric heating, meteor showers, and planet-wide tectonic chaos triggered by an immense gravitational disturbance. The motif of a destructive celestial visitor is not exclusive to the Kolbrin. Ancient Egyptian mythology contains echoes of it as well. The sun god Ra possessed a violent aspect referred to as the Eye of Ra, a manifestation of divine wrath, often personified as the lioness goddess Sekhmet. In the myth, Sekhmet descends to earth and unleashes such catastrophic fury that humanity verges on extinction. To stop her rampage, the gods resort to trickery, intoxicating her with red-dyed beer so she collapses before annihilating the world. Though traditionally viewed as an allegory for the sun's intense heat, the story reads very differently when considered as a possible recollection of a blazing red object that seemed to fall from the sky. Greek mythology offers a similar tale in the legend of Phaethon. The young demigod attempts to guide the solar chariot of his father, Helios, only to lose control. The sky burns, rivers boil, and vast regions turn to desert as the chariot veers too low. The catastrophe ends only when Zeus intervenes with a thunderbolt. Symbolic though it may be, the imagery evokes a rogue, luminous body approaching too close to Earth, scorching the planet before vanishing. Even the New Testament echoes this theme. In the book of Revelation, chapter 8 describes a great star blazing like a torch falling from the heavens. Its name is wormwood. When it strikes the waters, a third of the planet's fresh water becomes toxic, causing widespread death. The passage is usually interpreted symbolically, yet the text's specificity, the naming of the star, the catastrophic contamination of water, the lethal fallout, is reminiscent of an incandescent object entering Earth's atmosphere, accompanied by chemical or radiological effects. Across continents and separated by oceans, cultures that never knew each other preserved memories of a fiery, devastating intruder, whether myth, metaphor, or distorted recollection of ancient celestial events. The pattern is impossible to ignore. Humanity has carried the story of a destroyer for thousands of years, etched into scripture, carved into stone, whispered through generations. The question is not whether the memory exists, but what first imprinted it upon us. Whether the ancient warnings describe something yet to come or preserve the distant memory of an earlier catastrophe remains an open question. The imagery of prophecy and recollection blend together, hinting at a recurring pattern in which a celestial intruder returns, trailing dust, debris, or toxic contaminants, the bitter substance symbolized by wormwood, before settling across the earth. This theme appears again and again across civilizations that never shared a language or culture. Far from the Middle East, the Hopi people of the American Southwest preserve a prophecy surrounding the blue star Kachina. According to their teachings, the present fourth world will end when a new, radiant presence appears in the heavens. This apparition announces the arrival of the Purifier, a cosmic agent destined to cleanse the earth and usher in a new age. The prophecy states that when the dancer known as the Sakwasohu, the blue star Kachina, performs in the plaza and removes his ceremonial mask, it will signal the emergence of a distant blue object, visible shortly before the final upheaval. Many have interpreted this blue star as a comet, a dim world reflecting bluish light, or an undiscovered planetary body approaching the inner solar system. Similar motifs echo around the planet. In Norse mythology, Ragnarok begins when the heavens split open and the fire giant Surtur advances, setting the world aflame. In Hindu cosmology, the Kali Yuga, the age of disorder and decay, ends when the Kalki avatar descends from the sky on a brilliant white horse to overturn the final darkness. Nearly every tradition envisions a cyclical destruction triggered by a celestial sign, followed by renewal. These stories stand not as isolated inventions, but as fragments of a shared, global memory of periodic cosmic disturbance. In the geological and archaeological record, we also find unexplained collapses that align remarkably well with these mythic cycles. Civilizations have fallen suddenly and violently, often accompanied by evidence of climatic upheaval, widespread famine, and large-scale flooding. Around 1200 BC, the Bronze Age world crumbled almost simultaneously. The Mycenaeans, the Hittite Empire, and Egypt's New Kingdom all faltered within decades. An earlier example is the fall of the Akkadian Empire around 2200 BC, now associated with a rapid, devastating drought. If a large, passing celestial body could disrupt weather patterns, trigger volcanic activity, or scatter dust and small impactors across the globe, such events could destabilize ancient societies without ever bringing the object dangerously close to Earth. Survivors would remember only fire, water, and darkness descending from the sky, seen through the precise lens of physics rather than mythology. The potential consequences of a massive passing object are immense. A super-Earth 10 times our planet's mass, or a brown dwarf several times larger, would exert a gravitational influence felt long before its arrival became visible. Its power comes not from direct collision, but from the invisible, far-reaching force of gravity. The catastrophe it brings would unfold in phases rather than through a single apocalyptic moment. The earliest warnings would be detected only by modern instruments. Long before the intruder brightened in our skies, it would begin to subtly shift the orbital paths of the outer planets, disturbing patterns previously understood as stable. Asteroids residing between Mars and Jupiter could be nudged off course, increasing the number of objects crossing Earth's orbit. Meteor rates would spike dramatically. The night sky would fill with streaks of light, harmless at first, then increasingly dangerous. A prelude to something larger. The moon, too, would feel the pull. Its orbit would become erratic, its distance from Earth shifting in unpredictable ways. Tides would fall out of balance. The predictable rise and fall of Earth's oceans would break down, replaced by enormous tidal surges capable of overtaking entire coastlines with little warning. These waves, rising hundreds of feet in extreme cases, would drown cities and inundate farmland with salt water, destroying crops and freshwater supplies. Meanwhile, the Earth's crust, never fully rigid, would begin to strain under the gravitational stress. Tectonic plates would slip and grind, unleashing clusters of earthquakes along fault lines like the San Andreas Fault and the Pacific Ring of Fire. These swarms would intensify as the intruder approached, toppling buildings, tearing apart infrastructure, and setting off landslides and tsunamis. As the object drew closer, it would eventually become visible, a blazing, unfamiliar presence in the sky, rising alongside the sun or looming at twilight. Its gravitational tug on Earth's lithosphere would intensify, bending and deforming the crust. The strain on subterranean magma chambers could awaken dormant supervolcanoes. Yellowstone in North America and Lake Toba in Indonesia, both capable of eruptions of unimaginable scale, could be jolted into activity. An eruption of Yellowstone's magnitude would inject roughly 1,000 cubic kilometers of ash and rock into the atmosphere. This immense cloud would block sunlight, plunging Earth into a volcanic winter spanning decades. Global temperatures would collapse. Harvests would fail. The world's food systems would crumble under relentless cold and darkness. Civilization as we know it would face starvation, collapse, and chaos. All of this could occur without a single physical impact, the result of gravity alone, the quiet, merciless weapon of a wandering intruder. At the same time, The intruder's gravity distorted Earth's crust and oceans. It would also begin tugging at the molten iron deep within our planet. The geodynamo, the churning engine that drives Earth's magnetic field, would lose its stability. The magnetosphere, our invisible shield against solar and cosmic radiation, could weaken, fluctuate, or even collapse for a period of time. Compasses would drift aimlessly. Magnetic north would become undefined, and brilliant auroras would spill across the entire planet. What appears beautiful at first glance would, in reality, be the opening act of a lethal transformation. Without a stable magnetic field, the solar wind would batter our atmosphere directly. Over time, charged particles streaming from the sun could erode the upper layers of the atmosphere. In the same way, Mars is believed to have lost much of its air billions of years ago. Intense radiation would reach the surface, inflicting deadly biological damage on any surviving life. Electrical systems across the globe would be devastated by geomagnetic storms, frying power grids, satellites, and communication networks. Modern civilization could revert to a pre-industrial state in moments. If the passing body possessed its own magnetic field, the interaction would be far more violent. The magnetic lines of force between the two worlds could connect and snap apart, generating titanic electrical arcs, planet-spanning bolts of lightning leaping through the vacuum of space as the intruder swept by. From the ground, the sky would resemble a burning tapestry of plasma and fire. Perhaps the most catastrophic outcome proposed by theorists is a wholesale displacement of Earth's crust. This concept, known as a crustal shift or true polar wander, was popularized by researcher Charles Hapgood and considered by Albert Einstein as an idea worth scientific investigation. In this scenario, the entire rigid shell of the planet could slide over the underlying mantle, relocating continents by thousands of miles. Areas currently locked in ice could be thrust into tropical latitudes, causing the Antarctic ice sheets to melt at extraordinary speed, driving sea levels upward by 200 feet or more. Nearly every coastal city would be submerged. Equatorial regions, suddenly positioned at the poles, could freeze almost instantly. This movement would produce super tsunamis the size of continents and storms with winds faster than sound, tearing across the surface in a global scouring event. Even after the intruding body retreated back into the outer reaches of space, Earth would not return to its former state. The planet could be left rotating with a new axial tilt, altering the rhythm of seasons and changing the length of days. Its orbit around the sun might shift, leaving the world in a longer, colder year or a shorter, blisteringly hot one. The intruder's passage would also leave behind a trail of debris, cometary fragments, dust, and asteroidal material dragged inward from the solar system's outer frontier. For generations, Earth could move through this debris stream, experiencing elevated meteor activity and repeated impacts. The long aftermath would be a constant reminder of a cosmic encounter that reshaped the planet. None of these scenarios belong to mythology. They are physical consequences drawn from the laws of gravity and planetary dynamics. If a sufficiently massive body approached close enough, these outcomes would not be supernatural. They would be the predictable, if catastrophic, results of celestial mechanics pushed to extremes. The conspiratorial interpretation of this science is stark. According to this view, governments and elite institutions are fully aware of the potential for such events. Enormous underground installations, commonly referred to in speculative circles as deep underground military bases, or DUNMBs, are believed by some to exist not for nuclear conflict, but as arks to safeguard a chosen minority: politicians, essential scientists, and wealthy elites. In this interpretation, research into climate change, seismic activity, and space weather is not simply for public welfare, but part of a clandestine monitoring system searching for the earliest signs of the intruder's return. Any discovery, the theory argues, would be withheld because the implications are too devastating for the general public. The majority of humanity could not be saved, and revealing such information would trigger a collapse of social order long before the event itself. A threat capable of erasing civilization, the reasoning claims, would never be openly announced. The most dangerous truth in this narrative is that no system of power would willingly reveal information guaranteed to destroy itself. Governments and major institutions exist to preserve stability, authority, and continuity. If confronted with a choice between truth and survival, they would choose secrecy every time. The conspiracy concludes with a chilling assertion: the cover-up is not about hiding a rogue planet, but about hiding the fact that its existence has been known for decades. According to this line of thought, we are living through the final stage of a long-running, meticulously orchestrated concealment. And the justification, whispered behind closed doors, is simple: preventing global panic. Imagine, according to the theory, the world's broadcast networks suddenly being interrupted by a grave announcement that a massive celestial body will pass through the inner solar system in the near future, with a high likelihood of major geological and atmospheric consequences. The aftermath would not be organized preparation. Markets would vanish in minutes. The global financial system would dissolve. Supermarket shelves would be emptied within hours. The social order would collapse long before the sky changed. As the theoretical catastrophe unfolded, essential systems that modern society relies on including power grids, water distribution, transportation networks, and communication lines, would rapidly collapse. Not because the infrastructure itself instantly failed, but because the people who operate it would abandon their posts in a desperate instinct to reunite with their families. In such a scenario, the structures holding civilization together would disintegrate long before any celestial visitor reached the inner solar system. According to conspiracy interpretations, this is the core of the hidden logic. Disclosure would trigger a global, self-inflicted collapse. The narrative claims that secrecy is framed as a necessary deception, justified as a means of preventing humanity from accelerating its own downfall. But this justification, according to conspiracy theorists, is only the outermost layer of a far deeper and more self-serving agenda. The concealed objective, they argue, is not the preservation of humanity, but the preservation of a chosen minority from humanity itself. In this worldview, the first step in controlling a civilization-ending threat is controlling information. NASA and other national space agencies are portrayed not merely as scientific organizations, but as arms of state power, closely tied to intelligence agencies. Every transmission from deep space probes, every sweep from an infrared satellite, and every frame captured by orbital telescopes is filtered before public release. The belief held by many within the conspiracy community is that the public sees only a curated version of the cosmos. Their main smoking gun is the infamous 1983 IRAS incident. On December 30th of that year, the Washington Post published a front-page article citing scientists involved with the infrared astronomical satellite, who reported detecting a mysterious heat-emitting object roughly the size of Jupiter, somewhere near the constellation Orion. The following days saw an abrupt reversal. Officials insisted that the object was nothing more than a distant galaxy or interstellar dust cloud. According to the conspiracy narrative, this was not a clarification, but a rapid containment effort. They believe the IRAS team inadvertently detected Nibiru, or a massive, undisclosed celestial body, and that the discovery was immediately classified. Another figure frequently cited in this alleged chronology of suppression is Robert Harrington, chief astronomer of the U.S. Naval Observatory. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Harrington openly proposed that unexplained orbital anomalies pointed to a large planet beyond Neptune. He even suggested a probable location in the southern sky. But in 1993, at a pivotal moment in his research, and shortly before he was scheduled to present new findings, Harrington died unexpectedly of an aggressive esophageal cancer. His death, ordinary in the medical sense, has been reinterpreted by conspiracy narratives as a convenient silencing. Within this worldview, today's Planet 9 research is not a new scientific frontier, but the next stage of a carefully controlled narrative, soft disclosure, by permitting the notion of a distant, massive planet to enter mainstream science, but placing it on a vast 10,000 to 20,000 year orbit, officials can acknowledge anomalies without admitting anything that might provoke panic. It reframes a potentially hazardous object as a distant curiosity, effectively neutralizing any connection to the 3,600-year cycle associated with Sitchin. While the public debates simulations and orbital models, conspiracists argue that preparations for the real catastrophe have already been underway for decades. They point to the enormous sums spent on classified military projects, black-budget aerospace programs, and subterranean infrastructure. In this narrative, the deep underground military bases, commonly abbreviated as DUMBs, are not simply Cold War relics or continuity of government shelters. They are envisioned as vast, self-sustaining subterranean cities, built to harbor a carefully selected population for years or even decades. Sites like the Denver International Airport, with its unusual architecture and controversial murals, are often cited as surface access points to these hidden complexes. Yet some theorists push the idea much further. They claim that the most influential elites have already begun separating themselves from the rest of humanity, forming what they call a breakaway civilization. This hypothetical group is said to possess technology far beyond public knowledge, advanced propulsion systems, exotic energy sources, and habitable off-world installations. In this scenario, these elites are not waiting out the disaster underground. They intend to leave Earth behind entirely. According to this version of events, the true colonization of the Moon and Mars has already taken place in secret, and Earth is viewed not as a home to be saved, but as a doomed vessel to be evacuated. The cover-up is therefore framed not as protection, but as strategy. Maintain order long enough for the powerful to secure their escape. The darkest iteration of the conspiracy links this entire system of secrecy to the ancient narrative of the Anunnaki. Some believe that modern elites are descendants of hybrid bloodlines created to govern humanity thousands of years ago. Others speculate about an ongoing pact. If the Anunnaki are returning and require Earth's resources, especially gold, then reducing the planet's population would simplify their agenda. In this interpretation, wars, pandemics, economic turmoil, and social division are components of a long-term plan, coordinated by elites who expect to retain power after the final cataclysm and the emergence of a new world order shaped in concert with returning extraterrestrial overseers. Within this interpretation, the secrecy surrounding a hypothetical celestial intruder is portrayed not as a defensive measure, but as a betrayal of the species, an intentional coordination designed to manage a controlled die-off. The divisions, unrest, and rising instability seen across the world are reframed as deliberate signals of an engineered prelude to a final, sweeping reset. After passing through the maze of ancient myths, astronomical theories, and speculative conspiracies, one final question rises above them all. What is the true significance of the Nibiru narrative? Whether Nibiru is imagined as a hidden world, a failed star, a primordial black hole, or nothing more than a modern invention, its influence has grown into one of the most potent mythic structures of the contemporary era. It functions as far more than an end times prediction. It reflects a deep psychological landscape, a projection of fear, longing, and existential uncertainty in a universe that often appears indifferent and silent. At its foundation, the Nibiru story is an expression of vulnerability. It gives shape to the growing feeling that human civilization is accelerating toward a precipice under the influence of forces we don't fully understand. Climate volatility, political turbulence, widening inequality, and disruptive technologies all contribute to a sensation that the world is slipping beyond human control. Against such a backdrop, a single cosmic explanation, a predictable astronomical catastrophe, can feel strangely comforting. It externalizes blame. Instead of confronting human responsibility for the conditions we have created, the myth offers a tidy solution. None of it is our fault. The chaos comes not from within, but from an immutable cosmic cycle. The apocalypse becomes written into orbital mechanics rather than societal choices. The Nibiru narrative also speaks to a deeper kind of loneliness. Modern science tells us that life emerged through blind evolutionary processes, that intelligence is an accident, and that humanity exists on a tiny island in a vast, uncaring ocean of stars. Sitchin's interpretation offers an alternative. We were shaped intentionally. Our existence is not random. Our story includes architects, beings with motives, conflicts, and destinies intertwined with our own. Whether interpreted literally or symbolically, this storyline re-enchants the cosmos. It fills the universe with protagonists and antagonists, with legacies stretching across epochs. The return of the Anunnaki becomes not merely a destructive event, but a climactic confrontation with our origin. More than that, the Nibiru myth often functions like a modern form of Gnosticism. In ancient Gnostic belief, the material world was crafted by an imperfect or malignant creator, the demiurge, and humanity's divine essence was trapped within it. Salvation came through secret knowledge revealed by messengers from a higher reality. The Nibiru narrative aligns strikingly with this structure. The Anunnaki become the demiurgic creators. Earth becomes the enclosure. Human beings become the engineered workforce, unaware of their true predicament. And figures like Zecharia Sitchin, whistleblowers, and conspiracy truth-tellers serve as the bearers of hidden knowledge. Accepting the Nibiru story becomes an initiation, a declaration that one is awake to a concealed reality that the rest of the population cannot perceive. This framework gives believers a sense of identity and purpose. They are part of a select group who perceive the hidden architecture of the world. From a scientific perspective, the parallels to broader existential theories are compelling. Consider the Great Filter, a proposed explanation for the Fermi paradox. If intelligent life should be widespread, why hasn't any civilization contacted us? One possibility is that there is a nearly unbeatable barrier, an event or challenge that prevents societies from advancing far enough to explore the stars. Some versions of the Nibiru myth reinterpret this concept, suggesting that civilizations across the galaxy may repeatedly rise and fall under cyclic, planet-wide catastrophes triggered by rogue objects or wandering stars. In this view, our survival depends not merely on technological progress, but on anticipating and overcoming a cosmic cycle that resets civilizations before they can expand into the universe. What makes Nibiru particularly enduring is its fusion of the ancient and the futuristic. It binds together humanity's oldest fears, flood, fire, darkness, with the vocabulary of genetics, orbital mechanics, astrophysics, and quantum speculation. A 6,000-year-old clay tablet becomes, through this lens, a record of early bioengineering. A NASA press briefing becomes a prophetic confirmation. This mythic structure forms a continuous arc from the cradle of Sumerian civilization to the imagined end of our own. So is Nibiru actually on its way? In the literal sense, the evidence remains ambiguous. A blend of mathematical anomalies, contested translations, cultural symbolism, and deep mistrust of authority. But in a symbolic sense, Nibiru has already arrived. It is the shadow cast by our age of uncertainty, the sense that we are standing on the threshold of a transformation we cannot fully predict or control. It is the name we give to the suspicion that the official story of reality may be incomplete. Nibiru becomes a metaphor for collapse, for renewal, for revelation, an embodiment of humanity's recurring fear that the world we know is built on fragile foundations. Whether a celestial object ever appears in the sky is almost secondary. The myth itself exerts gravitational pull. It compels us to question what we believe, what we fear, and what we hope. In the end, the search for Nibiru has always been, beneath every layer of speculation, a search for identity. It is a myth about origins, destiny, and the fragile human longing to find meaning in the vast architecture of the cosmos.